Welcome everyone to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast. I'm a networking expert and the author of the upcoming book, No Strangers, How to Build Community, One Relationship at a Time. My why is the pursuit of mastery, and the goal of this podcast is to lock arms on a lifelong mission of daily personal growth to become the best version of ourselves. So let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the podcast. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We are joined by a very special guest who's achieved a level of mastery as a bass player, as the backing vocalist, as one of the songwriters for the multi-platinum, multi-Juno award-winning band Moist. So welcome to the podcast, Jeff Pearce. Jeff, how are you? And how good does it feel to look at your calendar and see that there's a handful of upcoming Moist shows after a 2-year lockdown?
Oh my God, Joel, it feels amazing. Actually, we have the first round of rehearsal. We actually had a round of rehearsal a couple of weeks ago, which was amazing. And now we have a bunch more coming up next week. And yeah, the first bunch of shows are coming up soon. And we just cannot believe that after 2 years of basically being inactive, we get to go out and do the thing we love the most again.
As I talk to more and more musicians during the pandemic, it's heartbreaking how the live events, the live entertainment industry just kind of shut down overnight, and musicians are left at home alone thinking, are my skills even necessary anymore? Am I irrelevant in this world?
You know what? And it's not even, I feel bad for the musicians, but a lot of us, particularly those of us who are now performing in what I'm okay calling basically a legacy act. We have other things that we do at this point. We sort of do Moist at this time, more or less it's our fishing club. It's our chance to get together with our best friends and do something we love doing. But our world doesn't revolve around it. But that's not the case for the sound guys and the stage hands and the people who sell and design merch and the people who run the venues. It's been really rough for them because they're skilled professionals and that is their skill. So yeah, it's been a tough time for sure.
Having Moist as your fishing club might be the best fishing club of all time.
Oh, it really is pretty great for sure. Yeah.
That's amazing. So we're both into networking. So I always like to start these interviews by sharing how we know each other. So in our case, we've actually never met before. This is the first time that we communicate, at least, face to face digitally. And this is actually a simple case of ask and you shall receive. So on Facebook, one day Facebook suggested that we might know each other because we have a ton of mutual friends in the entertainment industry. We didn't actually know each other, but I recognized you. I sent a friend request, you accepted. And I just asked, I said, hey, I have a podcast. I'm a huge fan. It would be an honor if you were on it. And you said yes, and here we are. So there's the power of asking.
But I also, and I believe very much in the power of asking. You don't get anything if you don't ask, for sure. And, I checked out the podcast you've done, the list of people you've actually interviewed. And, it's really great. You have a great collection of really amazing interviews with some of my favorite people. So it's incredible. Thank you so much for thinking to ask me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, you're very welcome. It's an honor for me today to sit down. And I wanted to kick off this interview in style. So I reached out for a little bit of help. So I have 2 quotes here from some fellow band members in Moist. So up first, we have guitarist Jonathan Gallivan. He says, this is a good kickoff. Jeff gets shit done, ! When he's aligned with a task, especially in terms of songwriting, arranging, recording, or experimenting, you can count on him to move things forward. I don't know many more people as dependable as Jeff. I'm really grateful to get to work with him. That's Jonathan Gallivan, guitarist from Moist.
Oh, that's amazing. And that is John as well. What he just said about me is him too. So I'm happy to throw that back his way.
And from Francis Fillon, we got to get the French on there, drummer for Moist. He says, I played with Jeff for the first time in 2013. And then he went away for a few years. When he came back, that's when I realized how important he was. His bass tone, the blend of his voice with David's, and his writing talent. He's a huge part of Moist sound. Jeff is a very humble person, and he's there for the good reasons. That's Francis Fillion, drummer from Moist.
Amazing. I love Francis. He's great too. And he's also Francis is the without a doubt the best drummer I've ever played with. He's absolutely incredible.
That's some high praise. I'll have to send this clip to him afterwards. So people know you today as a successful musician and one of the most iconic rock bands in Canadian history, but you weren't born like this, with this talent, with this gift, with this success. So let's go back to the beginning. I love to see the journeys of how people got to where they are, and it inspires the rest of us to see that he's human, that he had some challenges, and he had that big vision. He worked hard, he stuck with it during the pitfalls, and here we are. So going back to the beginning, do you have an earliest musical memory, a time when music maybe first stood out to you as being important?
Yeah, definitely. I can't remember how old I was. I want to say maybe 8 or something like that. And my aunt and uncle gave me a cassette recorder. It was a very strange format of cassette. It was like a C cassette or something like that. It was kind of like a audio version of Betamax. They didn't, you can't find cassettes that size anywhere else. And on that cassette, there's one tape with this cassette recorder, and it had 2 Carpenter songs on it, Top of the World and They Long to Be Close to You. And I played those songs endlessly because it was the only thing I had. And that was sort of my first memory of possessing music and really loving it. And then, later on, I'm of a generation where we used to record songs off the radio. And I remember having another cassette recorder that would record from the radio. And I remember sitting and listening to the local radio station, waiting for the Logical Song by Supertramp to come on so I could capture it. It was, that song in particular really meant a lot to me as however old I was then, maybe 11 or something like that.
What's funny is, as I keep talking to these musicians, kind of the same influences come up. So a lot of the musicians said that Kiss was their first concert. And I'm talking about some of the older guests, even some of the younger guests. Kiss was their first concert. And then a recent guest said the Carpenters was one of the first musicians they got into. I think it was David Bottrell, the super producer that's done albums for Tool and Stained and Muse and all those guys. I think he said the same thing.
I can hear that influence in his work for sure.
So I think it's him.
That's amazing. That's great.
I think it's him. It might not be, but that's what I recall. How did you actually gravitate towards the bass? It's one thing enjoying music, just passively listening, but then picking up an instrument. How does that happen?
So I played, the first instrument that I played was the ukulele. So just a small bit of background. I grew up on an island about 15 miles west of Kingston. It's a place called Amherst Island, and it's a very small rural community. There's about 300 full-time residents there. And at the time, Kingston had kind of like one rock radio station, and we had 3 TV channels to choose from, that kind of thing. There wasn't a lot to really sort of draw from musically. But I think I was about grade 5, and somebody showed up in our classroom with a bunch of ukuleles, and I immediately just fell in love with the idea of a stringed instrument. And I went from there to playing guitar and sort of in later elementary school days. But I really liked the idea of being in a band. I really wanted to, and I was into jazz, and I was into big band stuff, and I was into disco, which had sort of a big band kind of element to it and that kind of thing. And so when I was in high school, I joined the band as a member of the brass section. And we had incredible music teachers. They were super passionate about our music program and about trying to get their bands, which from Napanee District Secondary School, to the national competitions every year and that kind of thing. And the year that I first joined band, we were a pretty good band, but we had one weak link, which was there was this terrible trumpet player in the band, absolutely awful, and just couldn't hit a note, couldn't hold it well. And but he really loved being in the band. He loved the idea of being there and all that kind of stuff. And I remember he showed up for the next year of band, and the band teacher said, "Oh, you're back." And he was like, "Yeah, I love being in the band." And the band teacher said, "Well, have you ever considered playing bass?" And that was how I became a bass player. So
Wow.
I was a terrible trumpet player, and I became the only bass player. So that was how I became a bass. That's how I gravitated to being. It was out of necessity. It was find an instrument that fit me, or I'm out of the band for good.
So as a kid, before you decided that music was something that you'd really love to pursue, was there anything else that you wanted to be?
No, I never had any other vision. I remember I went directly from, uh, from doing Dungeons and Dragons and painting lead figurines to painting, the band van, that kind of thing. Like all of a sudden that sort of stuff went out the window, but I still had to paint. And so I was painting like what I thought would be the first band van that we had. And my notebooks at school were just covered with band stuff. And music became, by the time I hit grade 11, music was absolutely everything to me. It was exactly, I had no idea how I was going to achieve anything, but it was the only thing that I really wanted to do.
So when you were really young, you loved the Carpenters. If we move a little bit forward in time, let's say you're 16 years old. Let's say back in the day when we were young, iPods existed. If I got a hold of your iPod, what would I find on there?
There was no iPods in my generation. We had we had mixtapes. Mixtapes is what we had. And when I was 16, when I was about 15, actually, my world was turned upside down because a friend of mine introduced me to U2. He played me the U2 War album, which came out in 1983. So I guess I was 16, I guess. And that record changed my life. That everything about that was so raw and so perfect, and it had meaning. And before that, I was into, growing up in Napanee, there was sort of the hard rock of the time. There was Def Leppard and there was AC/DC and that kind of stuff, and Bruce Springsteen and all those things. But U2, it seemed like the band that I wanted to be in. They seemed like they had a purpose and they had a vision, and every instrument was important. And that was the thing that really turned me on to being in a band. And through that, I became enamored with other European bands, bands like Echo and the Bunnymen and the Waterboys. I used to make a sort of a pilgrimage every month from Amherst Island into Music World in Kingston and pick up a magazine called the New Music Express, which was a Toronto magazine that would feature all these bands from around the world. And it was my Bible. It was through that I discovered the Smiths and Joy Division and the Clash and emerging American bands like The Replacements and Husker Du and that kind of thing. Jane's Addiction, Pixies, all that kind of stuff.
So up until the point where you started having success with Moist, what were all the different jobs that you had? Was there one just horrible job that you remember at all?
No, I had lots of jobs, but I never hated them at all. I liked them all for different reasons. I had a job where um, I was at Cataraqui Golf and Country Club here in Kingston during while I was in university. It was a summer job, and I was the all night watering guy. So I'd have a 16-hour shift where I had to basically move sprinklers around overnight, and even that, which seems like a terrible job, was amazing. I've always found the best out of any kind of working situation that
You
I've
sound
had,
like
I
an
think.
optimist.
I think I am. Yeah, pretty fundamentally.
So how early on did you know that you had a gift on bass, that you had something of value to offer, and that maybe you could pursue this as a career?
Well, I don't. It's very kind of you to say, but I don't believe that my sort of most important thing in the band is as a bass player, and I don't think it's ever been that way. I just, as far as the members of the band goes, that is my personality, to be sort of in the background holding down the root notes and that kind of thing. I've always sort of felt more like a songwriter, actually. That's kind of the thing that I've been always most passionate about. And I remember writing on the ukulele, writing my first song when I was in grade 6. I think it was about a girl that I was in love with at the time, who was about a foot taller than me, and probably about 3 years older than I was, and that kind of thing. And that was sort of my first introduction into songwriting, when I kind of realized that I could put together notes and sing phrases, and people might think that it was new and fun to listen to. So I kind of fell into the bass. In fact, actually, the I don't know if this is jumping ahead with what you're going to ask, but when I first met Mark McAway, um, it was because in first year university, I was in a drama class that we performed. We wrote and performed a play, a musical play, and I wrote all the music for it and played guitar in the show band. And Mark was also in drama, but he was basically in the audience as an audience member. Um, but he told me afterwards that he sort of thought to himself, I should start a band with that guy. And the first time we got together as two guitar players. And I was playing guitar and he was playing guitar. And about halfway through that session, I decided to pick up my bass, and I just realized that Mark was a better guitar player than I would ever be. And so I kind of went back to my old friend, the bass guitar, and that's where I've kind of been for the most part ever since.
So I have some kind words sent in from someone that agrees with you on your songwriting chops. So this is from Jerry Finn of the Killer Dwarfs, David Usher, Burton Cummings. Jerry Finn says, I've been very fortunate to collaborate with the great Jeff Pearce now for a while. He's a gem of a man. Jeff is a great songwriter. The thing that sets him apart from other bass players is that his playing is informed by his writing ability. He knows how songs work and what they need. I see it as coming from the bass playing school of Paul McCartney. That's some praise. If Paul McCartney, maybe the greatest. This insight is rare. The other thing I'd like to add is that my parents used to bring me to Moist concerts when I was a child, and I've been a huge fan of the band and Jeff ever since. That's Jerry Finn.
That's funny. And I know that part's not true, because Jerry's the same age as me. So he's putting you on there. But I love Jerry. Jerry is one of my best friends. And that's very nice. Even though he's one of my best friends, he does not have to say things that are that nice. So I appreciate that.
Who were your bass player heroes growing up? And then today, is it the same heroes, or have some new ones joined the ranks of the all-time greats?
Adam Clayton, for sure, from U2. He was the first sort of favorite bass player. Before I got into U2, I was also into Rush, and my love for Rush has never diminished. It's just the kind of band that I wanted to be in. Ultimately, I knew it was going to be more like U2 and less like Rush. But I've always had a huge admiration for Geddy Lee and his playing, and of course Paul McCartney. I mean, he is the greatest of all time, in my opinion. There's no one else who can write lyrical bass parts that you don't even notice. They're so integral to the song, and they weave in and out of the melody, and they are always perfect. He never overplays, he never underplays. You can listen to a Beatles song for the 100th time and suddenly notice the bass part is sublime. And yeah, so he's always been one of my favorites as well.
A few episodes ago, I had Alf Annabellini, who's an amazing producer, recording engineer. He's actually in the new super group with Alex Lifeson of Rush called Envy of None. And a few years ago, I was able to help organize a charity event with Rush. And I'm curious if, when I sent you the friend request and I asked if you'd like to be on the podcast, my banner on my Facebook is a picture of me with two of the members from Rush. I don't know if subconsciously that's what told you I should do this podcast.
That is possible. It would be subconscious, because I didn't notice that, but I'm gonna have to go back and look for that photograph now. So
one of my proudest memories. And those guys sent me a custom Rush card that was handwritten in the mail saying, thank you. We couldn't have done the event without you. So those are some genuine guys right there.
One of my favorite sort of non-musical but non-playing memories was I was asked to interview Geddy for the cover of Canadian Musician when he put out his solo record back in, I want to say 2003-ish kind of thing. And so spending 2 hours on the phone with him, just like you're talking to me, was amazing. And he was so generous and so funny and kind and insightful. And he was exactly everything that I wanted him to be. And, I tried to not, I had a hard time not geeking out, but he was very, he was very kind, I think, when I did. So
Yeah, I have those same challenges when I interview all my, my childhood and teenage heroes, but hopefully it comes across as like endearing or something more than, frightening.
I always hope that as well. I hope that people aren't scared when I, tell them that I, about the story about driving to Music World and buying 2112 with my own money kind of thing. So yeah.
When we're young, a lot of times we're told to just go to school, get a good job, play it safe. Did you ever have a fear of not being able to make a living as a musician in the music industry?
Oh, 100%. I think the fear is one of the great drivers, frankly. It's but also I think it's important to note that with Moist, we started the band relatively late in our lives. We weren't teenagers when we came into it. We all had done our university. We all had university degrees, and so I think we all knew um, as well that we all had something else we could do. We didn't know, like I had a degree from Queen's University, as did Mark. Kevin and David both went to universities in Vancouver, and so we I think we all had the feeling that we had accomplished that, and that we had that, and that somehow that could lead to something else if the whole music thing didn't come through. I remember for the very first tour that we did, first time we quit our jobs, gave up our apartments, bought a van, the whole thing, and it was definitely going all in. Like it was full on. We were 100% committed to this, but in the bottom of my bass case, I kept an LSAT preparation book, and I kept it there so that every time I pulled the bass out of the case, I could look there and think to myself, I have other options. I could sort of think that there might be something else I could do if this didn't work out.
It's funny the psychological tricks we play on ourselves.
Absolutely.
So, how did you guys actually meet, all the band members in Moist? And at what point did you decide maybe we should start a band together?
So Mark and I met in 1986. So we were at Queens. We were both taking film, but we didn't know each other in first year until the end of first year, which is when we met when we were. I think Mark was taking. He started off as an English major, and I think I started off as a drama major. And by the end of first year, we had both switched into film, and we met at that concert play performance musical thing that we did, and we decided to form our first band there. And there was another guitar player in the band, a guy named Chris Hogan, and he had gone to school with Kevin. And so Kevin also was at Queens at the time, and Kevin had a band too. So we formed our band, which was called the VK Fan Club. Kevin had his band, which was called the Vanishing Waves, and his horrible student living house was right around the corner from our horrible student living house. So we got to know Kevin really well. We would play in the same bars at the same time, and we were in battle of the bands against each other and that kind of thing. And we would go to parties at his house, and he could come to parties at our house. And he was friends with David. So he and David knew each other from being teenagers and that kind of thing. And David's from Kingston as well. And I remember running into David. I remember David coming to a party that Mark and I had at our house. And I remember meeting him then. And I remember sort of people talking about, oh, this guy, David, great singer. It's he's not in town. He was living in Vancouver at the time. And so Mark and I went through the process of having that band, and we got our degrees, and we moved to Toronto, and we sort of got another band going there. And after living in Toronto for a little while, actually, sorry, there's actually a better story here. I'm kind of glossing over. Have you got some time?
I have nothing but time. Go ahead.
Okay. So Mark stayed for a fifth year at Queens. I went to Toronto after my fourth year at Queens, and I got a job working in the film industry. And Mark came to visit me in Toronto. I was living in a warehouse at John and Adelaide Street, total like crazy artist's haven where you could rent space for $1 a square foot. And there was artists and painters and musicians, and there was all kinds of crazy things going on in this warehouse. And Mark came to visit me at Christmas, and he said to me, we should move to Vancouver and start a band. And I said, well, I've got this job and I've got this stuff going on, that kind of thing. I don't really feel like music's my thing anymore. I'm kind of making headway in the film industry here. And he said, okay, that's fine. So Mark went back and he carried on with completing his film studies. and he made a short film that he really loved, and he submitted it to all of the film festivals in Canada, basically. And I woke up sort of one day that April, and I thought to myself, I don't really like my job, and I don't really like the things I have going on here. What I really do want to do is whatever happened to that guy who wanted to be in a band. That's what I want to do, and I want to be in a band with Mark. So I called Mark, and I told him, you know what? If you want to move to Vancouver and start a band, let's do that. And that was the day that Mark had found out that his short film had been turned down by every film festival in Canada. And it was a kind of a moment of the universe kind of coming together and sort of pointing a direction. So that's what we did. He moved to Toronto for a little while. We found a government job, which paid really well for us, that we worked together in an office working for the Ontario Waste Management Corporation, summarizing court transcripts. And we did that for a year, and then they agreed to lay us off, and we jumped in a van and we drove to Vancouver and started our dream. And while we were in Vancouver, we met up with, Mark and I had another band in Vancouver called Moist that we started when we got there. And that band, it just didn't, after playing with that band for about a year, it just didn't seem like it was going to go anywhere. So we kind of decided to end that band. And the day that we ended that band, we went to a birthday party for Kevin at his house, and David was there. And we started jamming with Kevin and David, and we liked what they did, and we liked David's voice. We liked the idea of keyboards, and presto, the next day we had a new band.
Man, so imagine if Mark doesn't ask you to start a band with him and move to Vancouver, and imagine if his movie didn't get turned down by everyone, and then imagine if you guys don't go to Kevin's party and jam.
Sometimes I feel like the universe is guiding things, for sure. There's definitely so many possible things, and honestly, we'll get into more of them as we talk more about the career of the band, but there's been so many moments where I feel like we've been kind of blessed, guided, whatever you want to say. But part of that too is because we never were ones to turn down the possibility that something might happen. And as my friend Jerry Finn would say, nothing ever comes out of staying inside. That's kind of words to live by. If you can always find an excuse to not do something, but if you decide to do something, if you decide to go to Kevin's party, even though you don't necessarily feel like going to Kevin's party, then that's where things happen, and that's where the whole thing happened.
You guys were #blessed. I'm going to ask that question. You don't have to answer, but this Battle of the Bands, whose band was winning these Battle of the Bands between the different Moist members? You have the mic, so you can say anything you want.
Yeah, no,
they
honestly,
can't defend themselves.
Kevin's band, the Vanishing Waves, was amazing. They had Kevin as an incredible keyboard player, and he was totally crazy and freaky and wild. They had an incredible guitar player named Brian who sang like an angel and played awesome guitar. They had a super stable bass player named Brad, and they had a drummer named Bones who would do a drum solo standing up and going around the outside of the kit. And they smoked us for sure.
Yeah, any band with a drummer whose name is Bones is probably going to smoke you. That's a solid.
Yeah.
That's a solid stage name.
It's a solid handle for sure.
So you mentioned that even before you moved to Vancouver, you were hearing about this David Usher that was a great singer. What was it about David that made him stand out?
Oh, he just had a really, really beautiful voice, and I knew as well that he was a great songwriter and that kind of thing. And I don't know, it's just sort of something that, he had a look that was unique. He looked, he was beautiful and frightening at the same time. And he was just he was a presence for sure. And we definitely noticed that when we were jamming that night. We had never heard him sing before that night at Kevin's party, but when he sang, it was just, there was a tone to his voice that was so appealing and so immediate. And we liked a lot of the same music too. And it was just very, the bond was instant.
How did you guys decide on the band name Moist? It sounds like you were using that name before the actual band Moist came together. And before you answer that, this year for April Fools, you guys posted a pretty funny post about the name Moist, if you want to share that as well.
Yeah. So So I'll do that first. I have one of my colleagues at my other life, my life that's not musical. He's from Portugal, and he's about 15 years younger than me, and he's married to a Canadian girl. And when he told her that I was in the band, she was like, "Oh wow, I love that band when I was in high school or whatever." And so one day I was hanging out with him, and his wife called, and he said, "Oh yeah, no, I'm here with Jeff, from The Moist." And and she was like, "It's just Moist, Peter. It's just Moist." So that stuck in my head as being kind of funny because it's a second language thing, and he wasn't around. He had no idea the popularity of the band was not part of his world at all. And so I kind of always just thought it was funny. So we posted a thing at April Fools that we had after years of suffering through this, having a band that's named after this word that over the course of the 30 years that we've been trading under has gone from being just a word to being something else entirely that we had no idea of that. And so we announced on April 1st that we were changing the band name to The Moist. And but the whole point of that exercise was that I also wrote there as well that for more information and to buy merch, click on the link, and the link went to Doctors Without Borders. So it was a way of trying to raise money for for what's going on in Ukraine and that kind of thing, by driving people to a charity website out of curiosity. And just judging by the comments we got on Facebook, it seemed like it actually may have raised some money. So
I remember seeing that post, and you read along and you think this is serious, right? And then you realize that it's April 1st and they got me.
Yeah.
But originally naming the band Moist, it had to do something. I remember U2. It's funny you mentioned you love U2. When they named the band, they thought, what is the shortest name that we can come up with that we can have the biggest on a poster? And you can't have anything really shorter than U2 that can take up an entire poster and really promote the band name. Is that, I heard that's one of the reasons why you took such a short name.
Absolutely. We wanted a band that was, this is also the time of Nirvana, Blur, Pulp. There's like tons of one word names that were short and concise and looked good on a sticker. And that's what we wanted. And we didn't want the name. We didn't want to, to have there's no need for a definite adjective or a definite pronoun there and the whole thing. And we just wanted it to be a single word. And yeah, we didn't really think that much of it, but there is actually a story, which I've told before. It's sort of a story that we probably shouldn't have ever told, but I've started telling it, and I'm going to tell it to you now.
Here we go.
Which is that when Mark and I moved to Vancouver, we moved there with Mark's girlfriend at the time, and she was also a singer, and she answered an ad for a all-girl band in Vancouver, and through her and those people, we met this guy who was kind of involved with that band, and the band was called She, so they actually had a band name that was good. But he was kind of he liked the idea of introducing musicians to each other and that kind of thing. And he was an interesting guy. And he told us when we were out for drinks one night that he really wanted to put together an all-girl band and call it Moist. And we thought that was terrible. We thought that was just like the worst idea we'd ever heard. But I remember about a month later, Mark and I were sitting on the couch of the house we'd rented in Vancouver, and we had our band up and running, and we had a gig booked. And Mark looked at me and said, Moist is a terrible name for an all-girl band. And I was like, yeah, man, I know. And he said, but for an all-guy band, it's not bad at all. And so that's kind of where it stuck. And it's been a moniker that's been noticed, and it certainly got attention. And we had people sticking Moist stickers everywhere when we were first touring in the van and that kind of thing. So I think the name helped, and for a while I think the name disappeared. Like it was like names do. Like you don't think about REM as being Rapid Eye Movement. You don't think about U2 as being you don't think about these things. And I think that for a while when the band was at the height of its popularity, I think that the name became just the name of the band, And it's only in the years after that the word has kind of taken on, independently of the band, has taken on a uh, kind of a life of its own.
So in preparation for all these interviews, what I like to do is infiltrate the Facebook fan groups for all these bands to be amongst the fans, see what questions they would ask if they could sit down with their favorite members. And I had a lot of fun searching moist groups on Facebook. So let me share with you my favorite moist groups on Facebook. I think you'll enjoy this. So, moist memes for dusty bitches. I hate the word moist is another group. Moist memories, a group where you can only say moist. That's the name of the group. Moist things, super moist, moist criminology. And here's my favorite. I think you'll like this. The name of the group is Extra Super Rare Ultra Moist Banana Seeker.
Yeah, that's all terrible for sure. Yeah, we.
So that's the rabbit hole I went down in preparation for this.
Yeah, this is where we are sitting now with the name of our band for sure. But we're not going to change it. We are who we are, and fortunately, the fans have come along with us this long, and I don't think that they have given up on the band just because the word has become a meme.
It reminds me of the band Anthrax back during the Anthrax scare, that they said, look, our name, we've had it for 20 plus years. It has nothing to do with the terrorist attacks now. Please, don't associate it. We're not going to change our name. So I remember they went through something like that.
Right. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's far worse. So.
Yeah. So we're up at the point, you get the band together, you name the band, and now there's a cassette that comes into play. So you guys have a demo cassette. It sounds like it was recorded for like $500 over a 48-hour period. And can you dive into a little bit about that cassette? And Sam, the record man, has something to do with the success of that cassette. Is that true?
Well, I think we were Sam the record man in Toronto was very kind to stock it for sure. But part of that too is that we were very aggressive right out of the gate with the whole thing. We had the cassette and we recorded it, like you said, in 2 days. So we formed the band in September of 1992 at Kevin's birthday, and we went immediately into writing mode, and we wrote 9 songs that we loved and we recorded them. We did our first gig in January of 1993, and then went into the recording studio the weekend later. A friend of ours worked in a jingle studio, a guy named Kevin Hamilton, who was an amazing producer, and he was a friend of David's, and he managed to swing this deal where we could go into the recording studio for all the money we had, which is $500. And what we got out of that recording session was Push, Believe Me, This Shrieking Love, Picture Elvis, Low, Low, Low. 5 of the songs that were on Silver were recorded at that time, plus Oh, Break Her Down, another one too. So we knew that we had something that was really good, and even in the cassette form. So we were playing shows like crazy, and we immediately made plans to find a way to get a van and start touring. And we did that, and we found a booking agent who was willing to book us, and we quit our jobs, we gave up our apartments, we went all in on the whole thing, and we were selling the cassette out of the van. We were selling it at shows, and when we got to Toronto, we dropped it off with Sam the Record Man and actually Sam the Record Man in Vancouver too, and and it started charting there. So it was very cool, and we kept at it. We had a feeling that we were potentially onto something. The success was very small at that time. It wasn't like success of like the Bare Naked Ladies tape or anything like that, but it was we felt like we were making headway for sure.
So then in 1994, you guys independently release your debut Silver, and then it ends up being re-released as a major label debut on EMI Capitol. How did you gain the attention of the label?
Well, so we kept on touring. We had this white van, and we kept on going back and forth across the country, and we got a bunch of great gigs opening for other up and coming bands at the time, like Furnace Face and Head, and we played with the Odds and the Tea Party and Bare Naked Ladies and all of these things. And we managed to keep busy, just living out of this white van. And when we got back to Vancouver, each time we would go into the studio and record one or two more songs. So that was how we built up the 5 songs that we kept from the cassette into the 11 songs that are on Silver. So that was all great. And we knew we wanted to make a CD, but we had sent the tape around to every record company in Canada, every single one, and most of the record companies in America. And every one of them had passed on the record, even though, Push was the first song on the cassette, same recording as what's on Silver. Nobody could hear the potential for success of the band. And we were getting lots of play on the college radio stations. They were big supporters of us. And we hit them every single time we'd go through town, every time we went through Calgary or Edmonton or Toronto or Montreal or wherever. And we applied for a Video Fact grant because we had kind of an idea for a video. And we got turned down for that as well. And the idea that we had for this video was that we knew we didn't have enough money for a fancy video. So we thought, why don't we make a video that's just one shot? And that shot would be David on a dolly being rolled down a hallway, and the band would be playing at the end. I say highway because we thought about locations. We thought maybe it'd be a road, maybe it'd be a hallway, maybe it'd be an alleyway. We didn't know where it was. And this is kind of an idea that we came up with while we were riding around in the van, going between gigs. And we thought that could be a really cool idea for a video. So we tried to come up with ways of shooting this thing. We just couldn't come up with the money for it. We knew, this is back in the days before iPhones, and shooting videos was expensive. But we got back to Vancouver right before Christmas of 1993. And we had just come all the way from, I think we played all the way out to Quebec City and then played all the way back. And we played, I think, a few nights at, like 3 nights, I think, at Wild Bill's in Banff or something like that. And we got back to Vancouver and we were supposed to have a night off. And then we were going to go over to Nanaimo and Victoria to play with the Odds, I think. So we had one night off that we were supposed to have to rest. And we got a call from a film production company, and they were looking for bands to play their Christmas party. And again, this is a case of you don't get to walk through any door you don't open. And when a door opens, it's best to walk through it to see what's on the other side. So we went and we played this Christmas party, and the people there loved the band. They thought we were great. And they were in between productions. And there's a bunch of people who were there who wanted experience doing a music video. And so they came to us and said, okay, we've got people here who are willing to work for nothing. They just love your band and they want to shoot it, but you got to come up with the money for the film stock and stuff. So at the time, we were already signed to a publishing company. There was a company called EMI Publishing, which is no relation to EMI Music. And they were big believers in the band. They really believed that we had something, and they loved the songs. And we went to them and we said, okay, we found people who are willing to make a video for us. It's going to cost about $3,000. And Mike and Barb at EMI Publishing said, well, that's not good. You can't make a video for $3,000. And if you do make a video for $3,000, it's going to look awful. And what's this video going to be? What are you going to do for this $3,000? And Keith, who was our manager at the time, really good friend of ours, he was our first manager and really responsible for a lot of our success just with his energy. He said, okay, listen, it's going to be one shot. David's going to be on a dolly. The dolly's going to be rolled down a hallway. The band's going to be playing at the end. And Mike and Barb went, okay, that sounds good. So we went back to the film production company. We said, okay, we got this. We got the money. We got $3,000. Let's do this. And we didn't have a location. We asked to use a hallway that led to a BC Transit thing, and we got turned down for that again. But there was this film production company was shooting a TV show. I think it was called Cobra, and it was a kind of a made in Vancouver TV show, and a bunch of people had worked on it. And because it was Christmas break, they hadn't torn down the set yet. It was just there, and the set happened to be an alleyway built in a warehouse. So we asked if we could use it, and they said, sure, fine. So we called up all of our friends to get them to be extras in the thing. And we went in there, and in 6 hours, we shot the video for Push. And we put David on the dolly, and we had this idea for there's kind of a thing that looks like a special effect. And it's the way the light moves around David's face, but it's actually just a Chinese lantern on a broomstick, and the guy is like waving it around out of the frame, and it's creating these really cool shadows on David's face. And then we had this idea that Mark would sort of come into the frame during the guitar solo when David would rough him up a little bit, and stuff happened. It's just anyway, it just kind of worked, and we went in and we didn't manage to get a one shot out of it, but I think it only took about 6 or 7 edits to put the whole thing together. And then we sent it to our publisher, and they loved it, and they sent it to Much Music, and Much Music loved it. And we got back in our van to start another tour. And by the time we hit, I think Peterborough was the first time that people came up to us while we were playing a show. I think we were opening for a band called the Mahones in Peterborough, and people came up to us and said, "Hey, we just saw your video." And we were like, "Oh, wow, the video's getting played." And Much Music got calls from people who liked it, and they put it into medium rotation, and they got more calls, and they put it into heavy rotation, and it started climbing the charts. And yeah, suddenly all the record companies were coming out of the woodwork again, and they were like, "Okay, well, maybe there is something here." And so that's how we got our deal. So record companies came forward finally, and yeah, that was the rest is history.
So what's funny is you were saying that you were already signed to EMI Publishing, that's not related to EMI, the record label, and then you signed with EMI, the record label, which is kind of cool.
It is funny. Yeah, and it is actually we were supposed to get signed to the person who loved us the most was a woman named Nancy Brennan. She worked for a company called SBK, which was a division of EMI in America, and she worked out of the American office. We'd gone down and played the South by Southwest Festival, and she loved the band, and she wanted to sign us. And when she told the Canadian label that she wanted to sign us, they kind of went, "Well, hang on, they're Canadian band. We should sign them instead." And so that's how that relationship sort of began. And so it began a little bit acrimoniously because they had turned us down so harshly, and because they didn't want to sign us until the American side wanted to sign us. But we developed a really excellent relationship with them over the years.
So you guys filmed that iconic black and white push video for $3,000 while you're independent. Much Music starts playing it, goes all the way to #1 on the Much Music countdown, and then in '95 it goes on to win the best video award at the Junos. Is that the most important music video of Moist's career? Even though you've gone on to make, I don't know how many music videos, is this the most important?
100% for sure. I mean, it is the thing that opened the door. It introduced the world to the band, and it's the most important 4 minutes of video of our lives. It might be the most important 4 minutes of anything recorded of our lives. It was incredibly, it was a bunch of things that came together in a really great way. And I think you need to have a lot of, talent to succeed in this industry, and you have to have a lot of, you have to be willing to take risks. But a little bit of luck is also excellent as well. And if you can sort of, if you can grab onto the lucky things when they come your way and make the most of them, then yeah, that's a good thing for sure.
Yeah, the first half of that video kind of shows how captivating that David Usher is, and kind of draws people into him as a front man. And then the second half, where it shows the full band jamming, and the fans that are there, and the energy. I got a Nirvana Smells Like Teen Spirit vibe, that music video for the second half, and
no.
I thought it was great.
And 100%, that was definitely what we were going for sure. And we also we had just, the shows we were playing in clubs, we were practically more punk rock than we were, or we were hard rock, but that was the days of mosh pits and that kind of thing. And the club shows that we were playing, they looked like that. They felt like that. They were that's the kind of experience that we wanted to capture, because that's what we were getting when we played live. And, but I remember, it was so funny too, because we got into our van right after the video was cut. We got into the van to drive back across the country again. And we just gotten the CD as an independent thing. It came from the press, and we started selling it off the stage. And yeah, by the time we got to Ontario, the record companies wanted to sign us. And that first sort of printing of, I think it was 1,000. No, it was more than that, because we were selling the CDs off the stage, and we could see the progression. We were in the van watching the progression of how well the CD was selling, where we were, the first show of that tour, we sold maybe 10 off the stage. And by the 30th show of that tour, we were selling 100 off the stage every night. Just because people were seeing the video and they were coming out specifically to see the band, even though we were opening for other people. And it was, yeah. And you know what? I don't think that enough credit can be given to Much Music as an entity, and it's something that every band of our generation owes an incredible debt of gratitude to, because it was a galvanizing force, and it tied music fans from Vancouver into music fans in Halifax, and it sort of gave them a commonality that made it possible for a band from Vancouver to tour to Halifax and to find fans all the way along. And it was a huge thing. And for anyone who could sort of capitalize on what an amazing presence that was, we owe a lot of success to them for sure.
It's sad that it's not really a thing anymore. The Much Music, it's a channel, but it's not, playing. I guess the good thing is there's YouTube where anyone can watch anything at any time.
It is, but it's not anyone can watch anything at any time. But Much Music was something where everyone was watching the same thing at the same time.
That's true.
It was a moment when a band was on Much Music. It was a moment that everyone could watch. I don't know. I mean, so you're 37. So when you were a teenager, was Much Music still a big deal then?
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
okay.
Growing up, I was glued to Much Music. I'd watch the countdown. I'd watch when they'd have intimate interactives, when they had bands, and my whole life revolved around Much Music.
And you are not alone. I think that there was every kid who had access to cable had that experience. And so it was absolutely an amazing thing.
Yeah, I guess thinking about it now, I take YouTube for granted, but you mentioned earlier that you'd have an extra cassette player and you would record other songs to have them at this and listen back. I used to do that with videos on Much Music. I would,
sure.
I think you could record to cassette or to VHS and watch them back. So that was the early YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the early YouTube for sure. And there's stuff on YouTube. I'm really grateful that fans of the band captured a bunch of stuff from Much Music for that time and have now put it on YouTube, so it kind of can live on long after the VHS tapes have disintegrated.
I have some kind words sent in from a fellow label mate at EMI. So this is from Robbie Campbell of the Mudmen. So he says, both our bands were signed to EMI Records. We had the honor and privilege of tipping a few cold ones, that sounds like the Mudmen, and performing on the same card as the legendary Canadian band Moist. Great band, great music, great guys. Jeff Pearce is an extraordinary person, the kind of musician who will add quality to any project. So they were guests of the podcast a few months ago.
Yeah, Rob and Sandy are great, and that band is fantastic. They put on a live show that's amazing. And actually, I remember actually talking to you. I can't remember if it was Rob or Sandy who called me once in the mid 2000s, asking me if I'd be willing to go out and play bass for the Mudmen for a tour. They were looking for a bass player, and I couldn't do it. I was doing other stuff, but I, in the back of my mind, I was thinking that would be really fun because they're such a high energy show and just. Yeah, amazing band. That's great. Very kind of him to say.
Yeah, I actually auditioned to be their singer back in the day. I was their singer for about 1 week. And then I auditioned by myself. Just they listened to me and said, yeah, all right, you're good. You're our singer. And then I went and did an audition, or I went and had our first practice and realized that my vocals weren't quite right for the full band, that high energy, the high keys for the bagpipes, just like pulverizing live show. I'm more of like a soft acoustic singer songwriter. So,
wow,
I had the Mudmen dream for about a week, and it's funny because we're friends and we talk about it since.
Oh, that's amazing. Actually, I've played literally hundreds of shows with their first singer Zoe, in other projects and that kind of thing, and yeah, Zoe's a powerhouse, and I think you have to be a powerhouse to get above the din of the pipes and that band is like, by their own admission, they're like AC/DC with pipes, or AC/DC when they had pipes, and that's exactly you would have to be fairly projecting of your vocal for sure to get on top of that noise. Absolutely.
So Silver comes out. The first two singles are Push and Silver. I think that might be the best first two singles for a debut album of all time in Canadian rock history. I mean,
Oh
those
man,
are
thanks.
those are two undeniably great singles that come out and introduce the band to the world. Are you able to give a little bit of insight maybe about those two songs, whether it's the writing of them or the recording, just any tidbits that the fans are dying to hear that they've never heard before?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't something that they people perhaps this is something that you can actually find on YouTube, I think. And I posted on YouTube, or maybe it was on Facebook, a few years ago. Um, I found the micro cassette of us writing Push, and I will never forget that day. Mark and I had an apartment in Vancouver at the time. It was before we'd quit our jobs and quit and joined the band full on. And David and Kevin came over, and we were sitting in our living room, and Mark had a little amp, and we were all just kind of sitting around, and Mark had that chord progression, and David started kind of blah 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 blah, which is how we write songs. And I was playing bass, and I don't know if Kevin was playing keys or if he was just there to sing. And but I remember when we hit the chorus, there's a weird thing that happens in the course of that song where it's like a 6-bar progression. So where it turns upon itself sooner than you think it would. And when we got to that, and Kevin and I were chiming in with "push just a little too late," or what, that wasn't the lyric at the time, but and we came in early, and David kept on going, and it was like, okay, what was that? Let's do that again. And yeah, and so I actually have the whole thing captured on cassette, and I think I posted it to YouTube. So if anyone wants to check out, just search for Moist Writing Push on YouTube. Silver is a different story, because I remember that song when we first started touring. We had that wasn't part of the first 9 songs, but we had to do 2-hour sets, and so we quickly wrote a lot of material. And one of the songs we wrote was a song called "Everybody Says," and it was a real bluesy kind of like "everybody wants, everybody says," and it was in a major key, and it was like really kind of uppity and happy and that kind of thing. And it was just a throwaway jammy kind of song that we could get up and play for 7 minutes in a solo one to kill some time. And but I can't remember exactly where we were, but I feel like we were on a deck somewhere, and Mark was playing guitar, and I was just sitting there listening. And he suddenly kind of went from the major "Everybody Says" thing. He turned it into a minor A instead of a major A, and turned it into an F. And he just started doing that, and it's like, okay, that's pretty cool. And then we kept the "Everybody Wants, Everybody Says." We took it into rehearsal, and we jammed it out, and we were booked to go in for another recording session. And David came to the rehearsal studio, and he said, "I think I've got these lyrics, and I think they're really, really good, but I'm just not sure about this 'We Are Silver' line." And I was like, "No, man, that's a great line. That's really cool, and I'm going to hit that with a harmony, and it's going to be awesome." And that's what happened. And yeah, so again, it was that song took a lot longer to write than Push came together very quickly. Silver took a little bit more massaging and hard work, but we got it somewhere that we like, for sure.
So two questions about those stories. One, do you remember the first time you heard that iconic guitar riff for Push, kind of that the Mark riff after the chorus? Do you remember the first time hearing that? And then, or maybe you wrote it. I don't know. You have a smile. And then
it's on the tape. Mark doing that, like he goes into the solo bit and he goes.
You're saying on the original tape of when you wrote it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it all happened that day, and so yeah, I totally remember that too. And thinking, okay, that's cool too. So yeah, it's like I remember it, and it's been captured. So yeah, I'll send you the link after we're done
Awesome. Yeah,
chatting.
I actually remember as a kid before. So I got into the band in 96. I was 11. I got into Creature, and I'll get into that in a second. But I remember, Push comes out before the album Creature, before I was really into music. I'm 8 or 9, but I still remember just that riff after the chorus always catching my attention, that this was something special. This was something iconic. It's funny what you remember when you think back to being a kid. And the other question was, you mentioned there's kind of this blues version of Silver. For next April Fools, you should release the blues version and say this is the new direction of the band, and whatever. Yeah.
Yes, we definitely should do that for sure. I'll see if I could find some tape of that.
That's funny. So the album comes out, and then you guys have a big Juno Award 1995. So you're nominated for at least 3. So you get a nomination for Single of the Year, and then you win Best Video that we talked about and Best New Group. How important are those 2 Juno wins for you? What does that mean the first 2 times you win the award, your own country is recognizing your work and your talent? And then now that we can look back in hindsight, you've received 10 total nominations for Moist. Those remain your 2 wins. Do they have that special place in your heart because of that?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. The only thing is, I'm going to just correct you on something. Push didn't win for Best Video.
It didn't.
It did not.
Wikipedia is
No,
incorrect.
it is incorrect. And we won the Juno for Best Video in 1997.
We get to see a Juno Award
for Gasoline. I don't know if you can read that. So that was the one that won the Best Video for Gasoline. So could you actually see that?
We can see that. We're gonna have to go in and update that Wikipedia. They do have you as winning for Best Video, but they have it for Push.
For Push, yeah. No, it's incorrect, but that's fine. We won a video that night. Sorry, that night for Best
new group. That might be the best one to win. I mean, that's
for
amazing.
sure. Oh my God, yeah. No, it was amazing. We were stoked. I remember that night like it was yesterday. It was so much fun. We had such a good time. There's so many sort of things that it was our first time ever at the Junos, and we didn't know the circus that was around it. The pre-parties and the after parties, and there's always like a charity component to it and that kind of thing. And we were just basically, for like 48 hours, we were just being whisked around from place to place to place. And those places included, meeting up with Anne Murray and Sheila Copps, the Heritage Minister.
The Canadian songbird herself.
Absolutely. And bowling with Buffy St. Marie, of all things. And just like crazy, crazy things. And because of the Junos were in Hamilton that year, all the after parties were in Toronto. So there was a lot of time spent in limos and that kind of stuff. Like that was our first experience doing that. And yeah, no, the whole thing was a whirlwind. And the best thing was my mom came to the Junos. So she wanted to come and she was in the dressing room saying hi, because we performed at that Junos as well. So we had a dressing room. And while she was there saying hi, David Foster walked in to say hi. And she was like, that's David Foster.
One of the greatest producers of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's that whole experience was amazing.
So as we wrap up talking about the first album, that's funny. You have all these albums. There's so much to talk about, but this is such good stuff that I really, I want to dig in and dive in. So you mentioned that recording the 9-song cassette cost about $500. Filming the music video for Push cost about $3,000. I've read that album, Silver, costs about $4,000 to record, and it goes 4 times platinum. I mean, is that one of the most profitable Canadian albums of all time?
I think it might be. I mean, certainly as a percentage, for sure. I mean, that's incredible return for sure. And again, it was, we could be grateful to a lot of people who helped with the making of that record too. Most notably Kevin Hamilton, who was the producer and the guy who worked in the Jingle Studio and 8th Avenue Sound, where we recorded the thing, who basically let us go in there for nothing. I think the $3,000 that we spent was probably just on in the end on mastering and sort of packaging and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was absolutely amazing for sure.
Do you think that Kevin Young's piano playing, keyboard playing is one of the things that allowed Moist to stand out? I mean, 93, 94 is like the height of grunge. And then there's this rock band Moist that has this amazing keyboard piano playing. Is that your
Absolutely.
ticket to stand out?
Yeah, no, we always referred to Kevin as our secret weapon. And I mean, there was other bands at the time who had keyboard players, but they weren't playing in the same genre as we were. They were like there's bands like Bare Naked Ladies and Blue Rodeo and that kind of thing. But we were, we were fairly hard rock for the first record. And definitely Kevin was unusual having keyboards like that, particularly having keyboard like piano and organ, the keys that he chose. But that was definitely something that added to the sound in a way that made us definitely, when you hear that piano phrase in Silver, the little piano breakdown after the first chorus, it's beautiful and it sounds great on radio. And yeah.
So I have a comment sent in from someone that knows a thing or two about keyboard. So this is from Jim Gilmore, the keyboard player for Saga.
Ah,
So he said, I did some deep diving here, some
that's a deep
research for
dive.
you.
Yeah.
So he says, I played a couple shows with him. Right away, he was easygoing and a very capable bassist that I would recommend to anyone. We got along great. And say hi for me. That's from Jim Gilmore from Saga.
Yeah, nice. Jim's a great guy. We played together in Toronto for he still plays in sorry, not in the city Toronto, but in the band Hollywood's in Toronto. Your Daddy Don't Know and that kind of stuff. I spent a summer playing shows with them, and Jim was playing keyboards, and yeah, he was an amazing fellow. And I was a huge Saga fan as well when I was a kid, and so it was a real honor to get to share the stage with him.
So let's move on to the album Creature. So this comes out in 1996. This is the dreaded sophomore album that every band is terrified whether they can duplicate the original success. I mean, your first album comes out, goes 4 times platinum, which is bananas. And this is my story with Creature. So I remember being 11 years old, being on buses for hockey, doing road trips, mostly to Kingston, which I believe is where you are. So I would go to Kingston, other places, and I had a CD Walkman, and I only had 2 CDs that I played on infinite rotation. I had Bush's Razor Blade Suitcase, and this is the same year, all 96, and I had
Definitely.
Moist Creature. And that album, I remember it was one of the first albums where music became special to me. It felt like it was that album sounded, it was powerful. It was dangerous. It felt like I'm listening. I'm a part of history. I'm listening to something very important, and that kicked off my lifelong journey in the music industry, my lifelong journey, my lifelong love of music. That's how important that album is.
That's
to me.
amazing.
So I wanted to
thank
share
you
that
so much.
with you.
Oh, that's incredible. Thanks. I I appreciate that. That's that grabs my heart. So I appreciate that very much. Yeah. You know what? We're still really proud of that record. And I think one of the things that it's unfortunate that we missed the opportunity to do it. We did a 25th anniversary celebration of Silver in 1999. Sorry, 2019. God, 2002, whatever it was. 3 years ago, we did that, and we missed the opportunity to do the 25th anniversary. The same thing with Creature. With Silver, we went out and we did a tour where we played the record front to back. And but we like the idea of playing Creature front to back a lot, so we might just do it for its 27th anniversary or something.
So is it the pandemic that got in the way?
Yeah, pandemic got in the way of very inconveniencing for everything, really. So yeah, but we that record was, I think I posted something on Facebook when the record turned 25, which was October 1st last year, saying, to our much loved but difficult second child. And Creature was a tough record to make. We probably made it. We definitely made it at least twice, like not the same songs, but we demoed songs for that record forever. And we have an entire album's worth of stuff that has never seen the light of day. Just um, trying to find that thing that we were going to be able to do to kind of come back and get the success we have with the first record. And in the end, we decided to pick up and move to Montreal. We were living in Vancouver, but we were feeling very kind of displaced there. We none of us were from there except for our drummer was from Vancouver, but the rest of us were kind of missing, Ontario and Quebec. And we had a lot of fun whenever we were in Quebec. And so we decided we'd pick up and move to Montreal. It was only when we did that the whole kind of writing thing really came together, and all the last bunch of songs that wound up on that record really took shape, including Creature and Leave It Alone and Resurrection and Gasoline. They were all there, product of that.
So I'm going to read through some of the accolades so that our listeners know how big this album was. So this one went 3 times platinum. It featured 4 singles: Leave It Alone, Resurrection, Tangerine, and Gasoline. They were all hits in Canada. Album nominated for the Album of the Year, Rock Album of the Year, Junos at the 1998 awards. Ophelia is featured in the first edition of Much Music's Big Shiny Tune. So that's a best-selling album series in Canadian history. That album with Your Song sells another three times platinum. Tangerine won 2 MMVAs for Best Director, Best Video. And in between 1996 and 2016, so in a 20-year period, that's among the top 15 best-selling albums in Canada by a Canadian band. So at this point, so you have a 4 times platinum debut, 3 times platinum sophomore album. At that point, do you feel like you can do no wrong? Like every album you're ever going to release is automatically multi-platinum?
No, we're still terrified for sure, because we still know that we've got to find some way to do it all again. And that kind of led to a bit of a lengthy break after Creature. We love the success of Creature, and that record was a record that kept on giving. It never got super high in the charts, but it stayed in the charts for, I think, like 18 months or something like that. It sort of stayed in the top 50 for a long time. And it just kept on selling. Like every week it was selling a couple thousand. And we're very, a lot of opportunities came out of that record as well. So it turned us from being a band that could play small theaters and large clubs to being a band that could sell arenas and do arena shows. And it was amazing for sure.
Is the song Resurrection the most powerful song in the Moist catalog? I mean, between the lyrics, the vocal delivery, the bass, the big guitars, is that the most powerful?
Yeah, it might be. I mean, it's got a drive. I mean, I feel like it's pretty powerful too. There's a bunch of stuff on that record that's pretty driving for sure. But Resurrection is a lot of people's favorite song for sure. And I still feel it. Whenever it comes on the radio myself, I feel like, okay, there's something kind of cool and magical about this song.
The megaphone at the end of the song, where did the idea for that come from? It's like, it sounds like he's preaching, which is
the ending of these.
Yeah. Any idea where that comes into?
No, I don't remember that.
That's all good.
Yeah, I can't remember. I mean, I don't remember when we sat in the room when everything was being mixed, and it was probably just an idea that somebody threw out, and and it worked for sure. Yeah, it's cool. Actually, I hadn't thought about that as a thing, because I'm so used to hearing the song live. I've heard it live a lot more times than I've heard it, and we don't do that.
so to me, it's the song's called Resurrection with the lyrics, like it feels kind of like this religious thing, and the megaphone sounds like a public figure standing in front of a crowd, captivating attention. Like it feels like a part of the lore of that song to me.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And David definitely takes on he embodies some kind of character for sure in the lyrics of that song, and when he's presenting it, that definitely makes sense for sure.
So you guys have trumpet on the song Creature and cello on the song Tangerine. So this is in between 93 and 96. Grunge is at its height, and here you guys are with cello, trumpet, and piano. What gave you guys the cajones to have these instruments. And is that what made you stand out?
Yeah, I think it definitely made us stand out. Part of it was that we wanted the record to sound different than the first record, and we knew that with Tangerine, we wanted something that was not there's something fundamentally push like about Tangerine in a way, that is in the same key. It starts with guitar, and I remember thinking, or I remember we're all sitting there thinking this could use something different, and I can't remember whose idea it was to have cello, but when we brought it up in the studio, I think it was our producer Paul Northfield who suggested this guy Claude Lamoth, who was an amazing, fantastic Montreal cello player, and he called him, and Claude popped in, and he was in and out of the studio in half an hour, and we just like our jaws just dropped when we heard what he did, and it just added an element. For Creature felt like a fanfare. It felt like that kind of a song. It felt like just the way it starts with a like even before the trumpet came in, it felt like that kind of a song. And it always reminded me, I think I mentioned the Waterboys when we first started talking as one of my favorite bands from when I was a kid. And there's a song on their third record called Don't Bang the Drum that starts off with a trumpet fanfare. And it felt like Creature could use that same kind of treatment, and it should have been honestly the album opener, and was probably meant to be with the fanfare of like, here we are, we're back, here's the record, here's the title track, that kind of thing. And yeah, it just worked. I mean, we got pretty freaky with Gasoline later on with the radio remix of that, which is full of strings and all kinds of crazy stuff too. So we were having fun at that point. We actually had a difficult time writing the record, but when we recorded it, we had a great time. We got to experiment and have fun, and yeah.
If you're not having fun, you're not doing it right.
Definitely, for sure. And that's the problem with the writing of the record. We weren't having fun, so we weren't doing it right. And it was only when we moved to Montreal that we started having fun and started to remember what it was like to be in a band again, and started to remember how much fun it was. And yeah.
So I love the sound of your bass. The bass itself recorded, it has a crisp and clear sound. You can hear all the individual notes. It's not just kind of this low end feeling that is under the mix. It really stands out. Another band to me that has a similar sounding crisp bass is Rage Against the Machine. I don't know if that's a comparison you've ever heard or if you agree, but just crystal clear, but you can hear the pop of the bass.
Yeah.
That jumps out to me. So I guess this is more of a tech head question. What amps, basses, pedals do you use to achieve your signature sound? If you want to give away the magic sauce here.
No, you know what? There's very little magic to it. But I do remember a very important lesson that was taught to me by when Mark and I had our first band together, the VK Fan Club in Kingston, a sound guy who was mixing us at the Alfie's, the student pub at the time, came to me and he said, you guys are really good, but you play together, you're really tight, but you need to listen to the tones of your instrument more, because you're in the same frequencies a lot. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, yeah, all right, that makes sense. And at that point, I killed all the mid on my bass and went to using just simply the neck pickup. Never used the bridge pickup again, and that's been the sound. Most of the sound on the bass has been on the first record. It was very much just the bass, just with everything dialed up to full. There's active pickups in my bass, and that might be part of it, but going directly into a DI. The later records we also used an Ampeg, but I feel like it's the classic sound of a rock bass. It's an Ampeg cabinet and a Fender Precision, and that's been the bass sound for all my favorite records, I think.
So we have some kind words sent in from Canadian television personality. This is Canadian royalty. This is Bill Wilichka. So he says, loved watching their rise to the top of the Canadian rock peak. They are proof that hard work and originality will pay off. David's vocals are nothing without Jeff's backups. And then he whispers, don't tell Dave I said that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Bill's great. And Bill's now a Kingston resident as well. So that's amazing. I feel like something that needs to be said. And I feel bad that I haven't said it enough now, but when he's talking about our rise, the band, the success of the band is completely about the fact that we all constantly play well together, and we play not just musically, but that everyone in the band has a role, and everyone's role is different, and everyone's personality is different. But there's something that just works. The parts of one person's shortcomings are another person's assets, and we just sort of we come together in a band, and that's been the way it was since 1993. Just like it's a team that works really well together because everyone's different and everyone participates, and yeah.
So we mentioned your backup vocals. I think that's again one of the signature sounds of Moist is the multiple vocalists and backup vocals. You mentioned to me that it's not David singing his own backup vocals. Can you elaborate on why that is?
Well, we always wanted to make the record sound like the band sounds live, and David doesn't sing his own harmonies live. So, and Kevin and I are we love singing backup, and so there's just no point in having him sing live. I always find it kind of weird when a singer sings his own harmonies. It always sounds kind of like just I find it disjointed, and you hear it a lot. I mean, some of my favorite recordings do that, like Sting's all over all the Police songs singing his own backups. But as much as I love those, I always feel like that's just kind of weird. Like, why doesn't somebody else sing those things instead? So that's why it's just simply we're a live band first and foremost, and the studio is just trying to capture that energy.
So in 1999, you guys release Mercedes 5 and Dime just in time for the Y2K scare. The end of the world is going to happen. So you have to get your album out first, just in case that was it. So this is
we've got to press into the pressing and then straight to the bunker.
And there you go. So another platinum album, 2 hit singles with Breathe and Underground, nominated for Best Rock Album at the 2000 Junos. Would you agree that that's a more mature sounding album? And if so, what do you account for that newfound maturity as a band?
Well, I think it's not just maturity, but also I think that we at that point we started to grow a little weary of each other's company, perhaps. And our record company, sorry, not a record company, our management company had a deal with Apple, and they managed to get us a good deal on Macs. And so instantly we all had our own recording studios in our own apartments. And we just started working more independently from each other, where for the first 2 records and every song we wrote that even wasn't included on those records, it was very much the songwriting was very much someone would come in with an idea, it would go into the Moist grinder, and some kind of song would come out at the end that may or may not bear any resemblance to what was brought in, but it would be ultimately much better than what was presented initially. And with Mercedes, we were bringing in more complete songs, and we were spending less time jamming the songs out and more time just sort of experimenting with the technology we had, and playing around with loops and playing around with acoustic guitars and sort of playing around with textures and that kind of thing. And yeah, I think it was just we were exploring a different side of our band, and we were independently we were exploring a different side of our own kind of musical journey too. So yeah, you can call it maturity or I'm not sure it's more mature. We were just kind of,
it's a progression. Yeah,
it's a progression. Yeah.
So I was going to, you might have just answered the question by saying everyone kind of got their own Macs and started playing around and trying things. I was going to say the song Underground has kind of an electronic intro. Then Breathe has, it sounds to me like electronic drums, and there's kind of electronic undertones to the whole album.
Yeah,
where does that
loops
come from? Is that just again playing around with your new Macs?
Exactly. There's loops all through that record. And part of it too is that, so we'd each be writing songs and bringing them in. But ultimately Mark had the best recording gear system. And already it was obvious that Mark was going to be the guy who would most likely be spearheading the production side of things, because he's got the patience for it. And he's really talented with that kind of thing. And so we would all leave our own apartments, go over to Mark's apartment, and where he had that set up, and because we didn't have it's just a small Montreal apartment. We didn't have access to drums there, so we would start experimenting with loops, and occasionally Paul would play a some kind of a hand drum or that kind of thing while we were recording in Mark's studio as well. And so we just liked that sound, and we knew we wanted to punch it up with live drums when we made the record, but we kept a lot of the looping elements where we'd have sort of a loopy small type thing happening in the verses, and then Paul would come in with the thunderous drums in the choruses.
So one quick question, and then we'll move on to the next album. So the song Fish, there's some cool bass stuff going on. So there's kind of this big open sounding bass note at the start of the song.
Yeah, big flat D, I think it is.
Yeah. So how do you achieve that sound? Are you actually slapping? And the last question about this song is, there's kind of a bass solo near the end, a short bass solo ish. It's kind of a showcase.
We've always discussed whether was it a bass solo or is it a bass interlude?
I would say maybe. So the question is it a bass interlude? And if you ever play the song live, does the band give you a little more leeway for the interlude to turn into a bass solo?
Yeah,
it was the bass solo.
Yeah, I think when we played it live, it would turn into a bit of a jam. Mark would come in. There's a phrase that is at the end of that interlude. It is a solo. I just feel like saying an interlude makes it seem less kind of it's like a bass
less
solo.
Pretentious.
Yeah, less pretentious. Yeah. And there's a phrase, and I think Mark would double me on that. We would just sort of jam on that for a while. I think that's how it turned into more of a launching point for an extended jam type thing. But yeah, thanks for bringing up Fish. I've actually kind of forgotten about Fish, but I love this song. Actually, I love the Mercedes record. I'm really proud of it. It listening back to it, it sounds like it stands out in a strange way from the rest of the catalog. But I always enjoy hearing it.
So I guess one final comment about that album. The last song on the album is Deliver Me, which is, it's one of my favorite songs on the album, even though it's not a single. And man, it's such a beautiful song. The harmonies are incredible. And at that point, listening to the discography through those first three albums, man, Moise could teach a master class on harmonies. Like the harmonies are so incredible across your discography. So there's no question here. I just had to give you a pat on the back because
thank you.
To me, a band that has great harmonies, especially live, is what separates them from other bands. When I see a band and there's just the one singer, and even though there are 3, 4, 5 members, nobody else is singing. To me, there's the amateur and there's professional. So Moise is at the top of the game with the vocal harmonies. I got to say that.
That's great. Well, thanks, Joel. I appreciate that. And I think part of that song too, that makes that stand out in particular, there's nothing else going on there. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that song, the version that's on Mercedes, is the demo that we made in Mark's apartment. And you can actually hear like a fan in the background of just the fan, because it was a hot summer in Montreal. No one has AC in Montreal, and so you can hear the sort of the noise of the fan and
that's the ambiance.
But you can hear the specific Moist vocal thing, which is David in the middle, Kevin hitting a low harmony, and me hitting a high harmony, and it's very well pronounced in that song.
So I have a long comment for you here. This is an extremely vulnerable comment, and I have to read the whole thing. So tomorrow I launch the newest episode, and the comment is from the guest from the next episode. So this is from Rich Bedeau, the former drummer of Finger 11 and Saint Sonia, who you have a history with. So here that's coming out as a 3.5 hour interview. And it's so important because of his history with drug addiction, his miraculous recovery, and he's a new man. Life is good. And he sent in a really touching comment. So I'm going to read through this. He says, I got to know Jeff while I was rehearsing with the band for their upcoming reunion tour. They wanted to shake off the cobwebs going over the songs before David and their drummer came down from Montreal to begin the real full rehearsals. Jeff was an absolute pro and woke up at like 4 a.m. to drive down to Etobicoke to rehearse and be back with his family by the afternoon. That's an amazing father right there. I, however, was in maybe the darkest moment of my life, struggling with addiction and depression. I'm sure Jeff realized this, but was patient with me, especially on the days where I dropped the ball and I showed up late and left them waiting for me to show up. I was definitely not at my best during this time, but I could see that Jeff was at his best. He's an amazing musician, songwriter, and businessman. Jeff, when you get this quote read to you, I'd like to thank you for your patience with me, and I'd like to apologize to you for not showing up at my best like you guys deserve to have. I look back at those days with regret and my performance, but with gratitude that I got the opportunity to jam with a group of Canadian legends that will go down in history as one of Canada's best. It was an honor and a wake-up call to get my shit together. That's from Rich from Finger 11.
Wow, that's amazing. And you know what? I think Rich is being way too hard on himself. It was really fun playing with him. And I didn't, we didn't know that he was in such a, because I mean, he was late a few times, but, and we, one thing we've always said about Moist is that we may not be the best band in the world, but we're certainly the most punctual. And so we noticed when he wasn't showing up, but he was always pleasant. And he agreed to jam with us for nothing, just for fun. Like it was, I appreciate him saying that, but he does not be that. He's being overly critical of himself for sure, and he's beyond anything, he's an amazing drummer, like absolutely so skilled and so fantastic, and I think really fondly of those sessions. And he was so nice just to agree to do it. Like he was doing it for again nothing, just to help us out. So yeah. Anyway, I'm glad to hear he's in a good spot now, and that's great.
So in 2001, you guys put out a greatest hits album. You've put out 3 platinum albums in a row, and then you go on hiatus for over a decade. So how does this hiatus come to be? And when you look back, I'm sure there's good reasons. When you look back at having left at the peak of Moist popularity, are there any regrets, or things happen the way they were supposed to happen?
I think things happen. I remember so clearly, we were playing the last bunch of shows that we played before we decided to take this hiatus were we were playing some festivals actually, it was a summer of festival playing. We were playing festivals all over Ontario and Quebec. I think we basically we're in the bus doing lots of things. And I remember Paul was always good for a joke, and I remember he told a story that it was just a dumb thing. He was talking about one of his, it was funny, it was a really funny thing, but he goes, yeah, no, I used to be in this band called before I started playing with you guys, I was in this band called the Amen, and we'd come out on stage before we show going, amen, amen. And I said, Paul, you've told us that story before. And I remember he looked at me and he was like, maybe it's time we take a break. It was like, it felt like we were going through the motions. Everything we'd done before, and we just needed a break from each other. And then terribly, when we were playing George Street Festival in Newfoundland, I guess it was probably around August 1st, Paul hurt his back. And that was right after the show, Paul hurt his back, just goofing off. And that was the last show that George Street Festival thing was the last show he played with us. And we had to find a substitute drummer for the other commitments that we had. And it just felt like the band was just kind of breaking down in every kind of way. And, we loved the Mercedes record, but it wasn't as successful as the other 2 had been. And we had these huge plans for launching it in America. Our management at the time was a company called Network, and they had great success in America with Sarah McLachlan and Bare Naked Ladies.
They're out of Vancouver, right? Terry McBride.
Yeah, Terry McBride, indeed. And so he had the same kind of vision for us, the same plan that they would use for breaking, that they used for breaking those bands in America, they would use for Moist. And they had this plan that, the American record company was our 3rd label in 3 records in America. And they were like, okay, this is a great record. We'd love it, but we would like you guys to have push on this record as well, because no one's really heard it. And we were like, you got to be kidding me. We did that thing. We toured America
2 albums
Push.
ago, yeah.
It was 2 albums ago. And the label was like, yeah, but your label at the time was in disarray. There was no product in the stores. Like, it was a terrible thing. The label really dropped the ball on this song, and you guys deserve to have another crack at it. So we were like, okay, all right. So we went in and we re-recorded Push, and we weren't that happy with it. Didn't really, it was fine, but it didn't have the same sort of spark that the original did. And it very much felt like the label and the record company and the management team were sort of trying to decide the fate of the band. And we had always been fiercely independent feeling, and came to all of our decisions through the five of us talking and fighting and figuring it out. And it felt like the controls have been given over to people who were thinking of us more as a product and less of as a band. And sure enough, the record company, when they went to promote Push to radio stations, the radio stations in America were like, we had this song, we had this like 6 years ago, we spun the hell out of it, and nothing happened. And the record company was like, yeah, it's because nothing happened because there was no records in the stores, blah, blah, blah. And the radio stations were like, well, that's not our fault. We're not going to spin the song again. Anyway, it was just a time where we just needed a break away from each other. And yeah, so that's what we did. So we didn't know that it was going to be 13 years, but it was.
So why do you think it got prolonged to that amount of time? If at the start you didn't know it would be that long?
I think we all used the opportunity to sort of do other things and to kind of get wrapped up in other stuff and to pursue other interests. David decided that he wanted to keep on making records, and he found a new management company. And he actually formed a management company with our dear friend Graham, who Graham was actually the friend of mine that introduced me to U2 War when I was 15 years old, and has been one of my best friends since I was like 4 years old. And now he's the manager of Moist. He started off as the guy with the station wagon driving us to gigs, and we started having him tune guitars, and then he became stage manager and tour manager, and now he's manager. So David was in a good place with that, where he sort of got control of his career back by taking control of the management situation again back. And he decided when he wanted to keep on making records that he wanted to do it with his friends. So he invited Mark and I to record. He knew that we had sort of gained some skill using the recording software and that kind of thing. So for David's Morning Orbit record, Mark co-produced half of it with David in his studio, and I produced the other half of it, co-produced the other half of it with David in my studio, and Kevin played on it. And so David sort of was set to sort of start going on his solo career, and Mark really dug into producing. And Mark and I we dug into a lot of songwriting stuff. We did a lot of songwriting things with various up and comers and a lot of Canadian Idol alumni and that kind of stuff. And so we really got into that side of things, including we wrote a song. Did a bunch of writing with Kaylin Porter, who was the winner of the first season of Canadian Idol. And
it was one of the best selling of the Idols, right?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
What, season two? Season two, I think.
Season two, maybe. Yeah, I think Ryan Malcolm was season one. And the song that we wrote with Kaylin was used as the walk-off music in season 5 of Canadian Idol. So it was played at the end of every episode of that season. And so we sort of experimented with that. And then I got into the corporate team building thing. And we just every couple of years we'd get together and we'd be like, we should, do we want to do Moist thing? And we were like, we're kind of, everyone has something going on. And it was only in 2013 that we got together and was like, okay, well, I don't have anything going on. I don't either. Well, let's do something then. And that's sort of, it just took that long for us all to find the wherewithal.
So when singers go on to do solo albums, they normally want to get away from the bands that they were in. In the case of David, he brings you guys in with him. That must have been like an ultimate compliment that he's not trying to distance.
No, David is like nothing but generous, and he and it was so much fun working on his solo stuff. I got to play bass in his solo band for a while too, and that was some of the most fun times I ever had playing, because it was nice with Moist. Touring with Moist was always about 5 different personalities all wanting to get input on something, which means that even stopping for lunch would be a fight. Where do you want to stop for lunch? I want here. I want here. It's like, the bus is going around. We're all discussing where we're going to stop for lunch. When we were touring with David, it was like, David, where do you want to stop for lunch? And David would say, I want to stop here. We'd all be like, okay, this sounds good. And it was just really, everyone had a role, and the role was very specific and very fun. And uh, Mark produced all of David's third record. And so that really gave Mark some amazing production chops and that kind of thing. And then David came back to me, and I co-produced his fourth record with him. And that was great again from the songwriting thing. And so it's sort of, David's generosity with help with us doing that was kind of helped us move on with our careers as well. So, yeah.
So 13 years after that greatest hits album comes out, you guys put out Glory Under Dangerous Skies in 2014. The band is now back together. However, you had some family commitments and you weren't able to dive in completely into the recording of that album, but you still played a big part. Can you share kind of what's going on with that album for you?
Yeah, I play a small part in that record. What happened basically is that we after doing the reunion tour, the guys were like, wow, that's really fun. Let's make a record. And so we started getting together to write songs, and the songs we were writing were really good. And but my son at the time was 3, and everyone else's kids were in high school, and their kids are sort of, they're at the same age then that my son is now, where I'm kind of realizing that he just doesn't really need me that much anymore. And that's, I think, what they were all kind of experiencing as well. But when my son was 3, he definitely needed me. And I wanted the band to be as successful as it could be. And I knew that would require the same level of commitment that we'd all put into the band in 1994 and 1993, like that sort of level of commitment. And I just didn't want to do that. And I remember talking to Mark, and I just said, I'd rather be the old bass player for a band that is successful than in a band where the band is not successful because I'm not letting it be successful. So, sorry, I said that wrong. I'd rather be the ex-bass player for a band that is successful than the current bass player for a band that's not successful, because I can't. Yeah, I didn't want to be the guy who was holding everyone back. And so, there was hugs and tears, and but they carried on, and they made a great record. And they made a really good record. And the only, so I'd done some writing for the record with them. And then when they were recording vocals, Mark asked me to come, and he said, it doesn't sound like a Moist record without your singing. So I went and recorded vocals on it. And yeah. And, the first time I heard Mechanical on the radio, I was just blown away. I was like, wow, they've really done it. And I was very happy for them. And yeah. So, yeah.
I found that the album had a little bit more edge than the Mercedes 5 and Dime album. And I have a few more accolades for that album. So the singles Mechanical and Black Roses were both top 10 hits in Canada. Both spent 20 plus weeks on the charts, so they had some legs. They're both bass heavy singles. They sound like vintage 93 to 96 Moist with big guitars, punchy choruses. Another crazy stat is, again, for 2 decades, between 96 and 2016, Moist was among the 20 best-selling Canadian bands in Canada, despite not releasing any albums for 12 of those 20 years. Like, that's a crazy stat. So how nice was it to have a new Moist album after 13 years?
Yeah, it was amazing for sure. And I remember meeting up with Graham, and he gave me a copy of the thing, and it was just great. It was great to see the band back sort of in, it wasn't the same again because Much Music was gone, and because it was a bunch of guys who were in their late 40s at that time, but it showed that the fans were there and ready to really support the band still. And it was amazing for sure.
So in 2022, you guys put out your newest album. So this is End of the Ocean. So 8 years pass again between the last album and this one. And I know there's a pandemic that delays things by a few years. So to read a few things here. So 3 singles, Tarantino, End of the Ocean, and Put the Devil on It. Party's Over is one of my favorite non-single songs on that album. I think that's great. And some notes I put down. So I listened to the entire discography multiple times. So I'm super aware of the different songs. I'm totally up to date with the new album. And my notes are I'm insanely impressed with this album. It seems focused, like the band is making a statement. Every song has great choruses. And I'm about to make a very bold statement here. I believe the album is up there with the very best albums in Moist discography. Do you agree?
Yes, I do, for sure. I love that record, and it was I knew immediately. So just to rewind a hair, I rejoined the band when we were doing a 25th. They decided to do a 25th anniversary tour for the band, and Mark and I went out for drinks in Toronto, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to rejoin the band?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, at that point, my son was, like I say, he was 8 then, so he was definitely getting up there in age, didn't require me as much. But as soon as we did that tour, the writing started immediately, and it felt like we had fresh, fun things to do. And yeah, the record came together in a remarkable way. And the funny thing about it was actually very much a pandemic record. We recorded the Beds in Toronto in the second week of March of 2020, which everyone will remember was
The
the
worst month
year.
ever.
Yeah, exactly. The week the world shut down, and we were in there at Revolution Sound, and we were watching the numbers. And on the Saturday of us recording the drums, we heard that everything was shutting down. We got back into our vehicles. Fortunately, we managed to capture the drums, and we all drove home to our respective homes, and we didn't see each other again for 16 months or something like that. But amazingly, through the technology, Mark was producing the record, and he spearheaded the whole thing from his home studio. Whenever he required a bass part or a background vocal or a keyboard part or David's vocals or whatever, we would record it in our own home studios and fire it back to him. And the way that he put the thing together is masterful. The record sounds incredible, and yeah, he did an incredible job. So yeah, so thank you. I'm glad that I hope more people hear it, and that's part of the reason why I'm so happy to do podcasts like this to make people aware of the fact that this record is I think worth listening to.
So I have a background in audio engineering, and I say that album, the new album, End of the Ocean, sounds incredible. You mentioned that it's actually Moist's own guitarist, Mark, that produced it as well as mixed it. My question is, did you pay Mark? Did you slide Mark an extra 20 under the table to have your bass right up front in the mix? Because it is right there. You can sink your teeth into that bass.
Well, Mark and I have known each other for a long time, and we've lived together for many of those years. And there was this one time where, well, I shouldn't say too much, but let me just say that I helped him get rid of a body, and I've been holding that over his head forever. And I thought, you know what, that time that I helped you dispose of that.
This is a true deep dive episode where we are going under the rocks.
Yeah, I told you there's no
bodies.
I think I might have told you that there's no bodies in the backyard.
That was a lie until we're live.
Well, no, it's not in the backyard, it's somewhere else. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah, no, Mark just loves bass, and he loves the tone of it, and yeah, it's a very bass. I love the way the bass sounds on the record.
So during the dark times of that first year of the pandemic, how good did it feel to release a new album and put something positive, do something productive by releasing an album?
I felt amazing. And we had to come up with a creative way of getting videos out there as well. And we managed to release 4 videos without the band actually having to show up to a video shoot. And the first one for Tarantino was there was a short film that David was aware of that was made by a Montreal filmmaker, and David just loved this thing and thought it would be really cool with our music underneath it. And he contacted the director of the short film, and the guy agreed to recut his footage to fit the video. Second one, kind of the same idea with End of the Ocean. We was a short film, and the subject matter of the short film just really seemed to suit the tone of the song. The third one, Put the Devil on It, I cut together out of a bunch of footage that was taken while we were recording the Beds. And the fourth one, Ammunition, was I put it together out of a bunch of found live footage that sort of goes back in time, all the way back to 1993. So it's a real trip through time. If you haven't checked it out, I'm really proud of the way it came together. So yeah.
So one thing that jumps out to me listening to the entire discography is with a lot of bands, the bass and guitar a lot of times are doing the same kind of playing the same thing, or maybe the piano as well. It's like three guys all doing the same thing, which makes things redundant. With Moist, it's like the bass has its own thing going, guitar has its own thing going, piano has its own thing going. So it's three talented musicians that have something unique to offer and to add to each song. How difficult is it for you guys that are doing different things at the same time to not be too busy with the instruments and to do what's best for the song, not necessarily what's best for the egos of each person trying to put something cool in?
Yeah, no, I think that we all collectively, individually, we all learned that the most important thing you can do as a musician is listen to what's going on in the band, and that's, I think we're all, the three of us are pretty good at that. We're good at listening to what each is doing and finding a counter melody or a counterpart that really fits it. And yeah, I think it's, and again, I think we've been playing together a long time, and we, but I think that was part of the initial appeal when we all started jamming these songs at the first place. I think it was when we realized that we could do that, we realized that we could probably, play nicely together in the sandbox, and leave each other space to do their own thing. It kind of comes back to this whole sonic thing as well. I was talking about with the, Kevin knows where he should stick sonically. Mark has his spot, and so do I. And we found a way to not interfere.
So you guys have, I believe, 5 upcoming concerts that are on the books. There's BC, there's Alberta, there's Quebec, Toronto. I'm curious. I'm in Ottawa. Any potential Ottawa or Montreal dates, or do I have to drive to Toronto? There's a Quebec date, but it's even further than Toronto.
Yeah. No, we're going to play Toronto and Montreal. Sorry, Ottawa and Montreal probably on the same weekend, like in the same flurry of shows. And we do have a date that I'm not going to say because we're still looking for one closer. There's been a bit of a thing with the pandemic where it's been tough lining up venues because every concert for the last 2 years has suddenly been rescheduled to now. And so we have dates in the fall for Montreal and Ottawa, but we're not announcing them because we're hoping maybe we can get something sooner than that. So
yeah, there's all the rescheduled dates, and there's also 2 years worth of touring musicians that didn't have any income coming in that need to rebook, need to book shows to generate income.
So. Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people release new music too during that time. So they've got records they want to promote as well. So everyone's out on the road and busy. It's going to be a very busy, fun summer. And I think we actually have, if I'm not mistaken, I think we have 7 shows booked right now for the summer. So we've got in order: Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Casino Rama, Toronto
with the Tea Party I saw.
Yeah, Quebec City with Our Lady Peace, and then Kelowna with Tea Party. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to every one of those 7 shows.
Which band were you the biggest fan of before performing with them on the same bill? And what's the best live concert you've ever seen? So this could be outside of Moist playing anywhere.
Yeah. Okay. So definitely the best live concert I've ever seen, going back to my U2 fandom again, it was watching U2 at the Ottawa Civic Center. I don't know what you call that now. It's that space underneath the
TD place.
Yeah. So it's like a small arena, maybe holds like 5,000 people or something like that. And I saw them there in it was April of 1985 when they were supporting the Unforgettable Fire. And that was just a moment that just changed my life forever. It was amazing. As far as like performing, we've had the opportunity of playing with so many amazing musicians that we've been fans of for a long time. Like, we toured with Neil Young, and we played with Red Hot Chili Peppers and Metallica and Green Day and Foo Fighters, and
only the greatest bands of all time.
Pretty much, yeah. And they were we got to call them contemporaries, and it was an amazing time. That whole period of time that we got to do that from 94 to 99 and into 2000 was incredible. It was great to be part of such an amazing group of musicians that was out touring all over the place. So yeah.
I have some kind words sent in from a fellow bass player. So this is from Chuck Daly from I Mother Earth. He says, Jeff is one of the best songwriters and best driven artists I've ever had the pleasure of working with. He's such a wonderful friend and mentor to me over the years. I've subbed in for Jeff on countless gigs, and his bandmates absolutely adore him. Every band I jump into that he is a part of, I find myself surrounded with love and smiles and incredible music. Thanks to Jeff, I also had the honor of playing in David Usher's band. He's also the only bassist I've ever shared gigs with where we both show up. Dueling bassists, and it fucking rocks. Woo! Chuck Daly, I Mother Earth.
Oh, that's so great. Chuck's awesome. He's such a great talent. Like, oh my God, talented guy beyond belief. Um, yeah, I feel like he undersells himself as a bass player. He's one of the best. Like, he's absolutely incredible and amazing. And again, like the things that he did with the Salads, basically taking control of the business side of that band and producing the records. And I remember when he was, I remember a story about how he got Angelo from Fishbone to sing on the record, and he like literally went around with the mic and a little sort of baffle thing and found Angelos and got him to sing or something like that. Anyway, just great guy, super talented guy for sure.
He was the first big artist that I had on this podcast. So this was the end of last year. I was a fan of the Salads at 14. I waited in line for his autograph at a future shop. And finally, all these years later, at the end of last year, I had the courage to ask him to be a guest. He said yes. And then suddenly I had I Mother Earth on the podcast. And because of that, Finger 11 saw that he was on and said, hey, our schedule's open if you'd like to have us. And then once you have I Mother Earth and Finger 11, those names are bigger than a lot of pretty big bands. So they all see that and they go, well, if these guys are on it, it's probably a good idea if I do it. So that led to the Arkells and Il Scarlet. So I owe a lot of the success to Chuck. And I just went out to Kingston to see him play bass for the Standstills, who are guests on the podcast.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so I owe that guy a lot. He's a great dude.
So as far as putting things out there into the universe go, like how many steps do you think it'll take for you to have Paul McCartney on your podcast?
You know what? I'm an optimist as well, and I dream big. So I think it's possible I could get him. But
it is absolutely for sure.
But yeah. Can I just go into my contacts and call my old pal Paul? I don't know. We'll see.
No, not yet. But
when he's on the podcast, you will be the first one I will contact when I have his date scheduled on the books.
Yeah, please. That's great. I've got some words to I have some complimentary words. He probably hasn't heard many compliments in his career, but I've got some nice things to say about his bass playing.
Yeah, I'm sure he doesn't have any yes men around him, but
no, not at all.
So you actually, this was brought to my attention by Chuck. So you work with a company that uses music themed programs for team building. And Chuck provided another quote I'll read, which ties into this. So Chuck says, I've only seen him do it one time, but I know he does it at universities quite a bit. The time I saw him present was for a corporation. It may have been Nestle. He teaches people about teamwork and team building. He does it from a podium, and he has an entire presentation he does intertwined with tour footage of Moist. It's quite brilliant as he draws the parallels of keeping a rock band together and finding success to every other teamwork anyone might be trying to accomplish. So I was going to ask you to kind of describe what you do, but maybe Chuck just did a good job.
I think he did a great job of it. I mean, the whole idea is that a band requires, like any other team, it requires different personalities who are responsible for different things, different strengths and different weaknesses. And the success of Moist was based on that. I call it, I talk about it being like risk, trust, and creativity are the things that made our success happen. It was the risk of being willing to quit the jobs and buy the van and go into debt and give up the apartments and that kind of thing and get on the road. It was the creativity of coming up with ideas like the Push video and the songwriting and Mark's guitar thing in Push and all that kind of stuff. But most importantly, is trust in the team. It's like surrounding yourself with a team of people that you know and love and can trust that they've got your back and that their interest is the same as yours and that you ultimately have the same goal. And that's the general sort of premise of the of the presentation. And that's really it's fun to give it, and it's fun to do it, and it's fun to sort of when I tell the story about Much Music receiving um, the push video, and about the the sales of the record increasing with every 1,000 miles on the tour, I found myself getting a little choked up, because it was really, it was a very important moment in my life. And there was some times in the beginning with this band where we did not know how we were going to make it. We didn't know. We owed money to everyone and everything, and we were seeing nothing but closed doors. And yeah, and yet, whenever we saw a patch of light, we would elbow our way in and make it big enough for us to get the van in, basically. So yeah.
So as we approach the 2-hour mark of the conversation here, are you okay if we do rapid fire questions, just through a few questions?
Hit me. Yep.
Hit me. All right. Do your kids think of you? Do they think their dad is a rock star, or are you just some schmuck at home that puts food on the table?
Schmuck, for sure. Yeah. I think Charlie, who's 11 now, he went and saw, when he was 8, he went and saw the first show back that I did with Moist, which was playing with the band live in Quebec City. So it was about 15,000 people there. And I think he was a little bit surprised and slightly in awe at the sort of the spectacle of it, just the hugeness of it, because he'd heard about Dad being in a band, but he hadn't really witnessed it. But that sort of faded pretty fast, and I went back to being the schmuck in the house pretty quickly after that. So yeah, he's into his kind of music. Is like, he's at that age where he's like, his musical taste changes pretty much hourly. So yeah,
it's Justin Bieber versus Moist. It's a tough sell.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I'm grateful he's not into the Biebs yet. Although, I mean, I like the Biebs, but the
Biebs will get you if you give him.
Oh yeah, for sure. Right now, he's into actually a metal band from Sweden called Sabaton right now. Which is like, it's all songs about war. He's 11 years old, so war is pretty important in his list of passions. So yeah,
he can relate somehow. That's a powerful shout out to Sabaton right there.
Yeah.
What would you say are your all-time favorite albums? I don't know, maybe top 3, top 5, whatever just comes to mind.
Yeah, okay. So U2 War, Rush Moving Pictures, and Waterboys, Pagan Place.
When you first started, could you have ever
imagined? And Rheostatic Whale Music. Sorry, Rheostatic Whale Music is my absolute all-time favorite. If I could change my mind every second, but Rheostatic Whale Music, that's my final answer. Sticking with it.
Those poor guys almost missed that shout out. So we got it in there. When you first started, could you ever have imagined the level of success you've achieved with Moist?
No, definitely not, for sure. But it was something we hoped for, but at the same time, no, actually, that's not true. I was imagining being a rock star from the time that I was daydreaming in my, grade 9 homeroom. So it didn't feel the same way that I imagined it feeling when I was actually in it. But yeah, no, I definitely imagined it for sure. Not that I'm, still grateful though.
Do you have any musical dreams that have yet to come to fruition?
Not really. I mean, I shouldn't. Not specifically. I still keep on wanting to write great songs, and maybe at some point I'll write the great Canadian musical. I've seen over the pandemic, I saw Hamilton and Come From Away, and I'm enamored by the people who can put together pieces of work like that, and I'd love to try that sometime. But whether or not I'll ever get to it,
you got to have hockey and igloos and Don Cherry and other things in it.
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah.
When you look back on your life and your career, what are you most proud of and most grateful for?
I'm most grateful for the guys in the band. If it wasn't for that particular group of 4 guys, 5 actually, sorry, 4 plus myself, plus our first manager Keith, who was so instrumental he brought an energy to the whole thing. And yeah, I have nothing but gratitude for. They've been my best friends for literally 3 decades now. And I've got nothing but, particularly Mark, because Mark was he was my first band mate, and he's been with me longest. And
it's your longest relationship right there.
Pretty much. And actually, funnily enough, and Graham, who I mentioned earlier, who introduced me to you two, who's now the band manager as well. So, but Kevin and I've got super great love for Kevin, and I love David, and just I've nothing but gratitude.
If you could sit down for a conversation with anyone, living or dead, who would it be?
Oh man. Um I'm gonna have to pass on this. I'm drawing a blank, I'm afraid.
That's
So
all. That's all good. We'll just throw Paul McCartney in there just for
there you go. Paul
continuation.
McCartney. That's who I was wanting to talk. That's yeah, for sure. Perfect.
What's got you most excited right now?
Well, right now, honestly, the thing's most exciting is the prospect of live music happening again everywhere and everything, and doing events, getting back to doing corporate events and team building events and that kind of stuff. It's just, I think the I think the world is primed, and hopefully we're not in for any kind of more nasty surprises on the variant front. And but yeah, I think we all have reason to be optimistic right now for sure.
So I have the final quote of the interview here. So this is from an amazing singer-songwriter named Sarah Smith. So she says, I don't know Jeff that well on a personal level, but I do absolutely love his melodic bass lines. He is a killer player. So that's Sarah Smith. She's from the
Nice.
London, Ontario
Yeah, I know.
area.
Yeah,
She's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. She is amazing for sure. Yeah, no, I don't know her that well either, but I know I definitely did an event with her once and met her, and she was super nice and kind. And I've heard her stuff, and she's an incredible singer songwriter. So yeah, nice, awesome. Well, thanks, Sarah.
We're down to the final two questions, and these are the hardest questions. Are you ready for this big finale?
I am. Hit me.
Jeff, what do you think is the meaning of life? Why are we here? What is going on? What is this all about?
Honestly, in the words of Bill and Ted, be excellent to each other.
That might be the best answer yet for that question. Now, here's the final question. If you could go back in time and you could sit down next to a 10-year-old Jeff, so this cute little 10-year-old Jeff, and you're able to whisper advice. So you've had all these years of experience, of mentorship, of lessons, training, the highs and the lows. What do you whisper to little Jeff to help him along the way?
Now, Joel, apparently you haven't seen the Back to the Future movies, but if there's one thing we've learned from them, it's that you don't want to mess with the timeline. I could say something to 10-year-old Jeff, and that could change everything that happens.
The course of history.
The course of history, the course of my life. And honestly, frankly, I'm pretty happy with the way everything's turned out. I'm a pretty happy guy, and I've got a wonderful family and a wonderful band and other things that I do that I love. And yeah, I don't think I'd want to say anything to him. I wanted to stay a surprise. I could whisper words of encouragement. I could tell him it's all going to work out. But frankly, it's, as I mentioned before, sometimes the fear is what has been the best driving force. I might say something about Bitcoin to him, but I don't know. I'm not sure if I was wealthy. I'm not sure if I'd be any happier either. So, oh, I know what it would be actually. I would say to him, when you're with the band on the very first tour and you go to Jasper, Alberta, and you're at I think it's the Athabasca Hotel there, do not have the shrimp salad. Don't do it. When you're in the mountains, stick with the beef, stay away from the seafood.
That is all-time great advice for young Jeff. We've covered so much over the last 2 hours. Is there anything that we have not covered that just has to be said before we wrap up?
No, I think I love what you've asked. I love what you've done. And the only thing I can just say again is just how much gratitude I have towards the people who've supported the band for 30 years and most importantly to my bandmates for their continued, for being inspired. We inspire each other, and I'm so grateful for them.
So where can our listeners go if they want to learn more about Moist, or whether they want to find the music, or if they've checked out the interview and they want to reach out to you, maybe slide into your DMs and say, hey, I love the interview, or whatever? Where can they find you online? Maybe Instagram, maybe Facebook?
Yeah. You can find me on Facebook at my handle is Rockstar Live Canada. Rockstar Live is the karaoke band that I have with Jerry Finn, who you read a quote from before. we do a live band karaoke thing, which is so much fun, and we do it for corporate events and that kind of stuff. We basically give people the opportunity to feel what it's like to front a real live rock band. And so you can find me there. You can find Moist at Moist Online and moistonline.com. And then please reach out. We're very, usually if you reach out by Facebook, somebody will get back to you.
So the last thing before we wrap up, I just want to take a second to acknowledge you for your lifelong pursuit of mastery as a bass player, for creating all-time great music that was powerful enough to change my life and put me on a trajectory in the music industry. I want to thank you for being one of the nice guys in the entertainment industry, as all these comments can attest to. I want to thank you for dreaming big and showing everyone what is possible when you have a grand vision and enough belief and work ethic to pursue it, showing us what is possible when you dedicate your life to that. And the last thing is, I want to say thank you as a fan of Moist, being able to sit down with, one of your as a teenager, one of your heroes. And I mean, I asked 2 hours worth of questions. These are questions that I want to know as a fan, that what keeps me up at night. Man, I might have the best sleep of all time tonight because all my questions have been answered.
So Joel, I thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you for doing this podcast. And thank you for thank you for wanting to ask. And I really appreciate it. And I think as far as dreaming big goes, I predict you're going to be interviewing Paul McCartney within 3 years. 3 years to get to Paul McCartney, I bet. So I'm looking forward to seeing that happen.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Jeff. To our listeners, to our Moist fans, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next episode. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I'd love to hear from you guys. My goal is to grow this podcast organically, where you're giving me feedback on topics you'd like me to cover and guests you'd like me to interview. You can reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Joel Martin Mastery. Joel is Joel, and on Twitter at Joel Mastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.